What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 49th episode of Tequila Tuesday and Scotty's Little Sales Club. We are brought to you today and every Tuesday by our good friends and special sending partner, Sendoso. And magically, our guest tonight is a director of sales over at Sendoso, a guy, Nick Casale, guy I've known for a couple of years now, and has been big fan of Surf and Sales along the way. Sent one of his top producers, Kyle Roybal, to Surf and Sales, not once, but twice. And Nick is a big sales leader at Sendoso. He's been there for a long time, since they were a tiny little baby company, and they're getting big. So he's seen a lot. And he's going to talk to us today about driving human connection. And we're going to kind of sit back, listen to what he has to say, learn a lot from him. And as usual, if you got questions, drop them in the chat. You can drop them to everyone. You can hit me privately in the DM. I'll take you off mute when the time is right, and we'll rock and roll. So welcome to the show, Nick.
Hell of an intro. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you having me.
Welcome, man.
And quick plug. We are, I don't know if you even knew this, but we are running a spiff right now. Top rep for the quarter is going to be going to Surf and Sales again.
I did.
2 slots. So top rep for the quarter is going to be going to Surf and Sales. And then we have a as voted by their peers slot.
Love that.
Which is a lot of fun too. So
yeah. In November, there'll be 2 Sendoso representatives.
Yeah. And true to the theme, I've got my tequila hat on.
I like that. What do you think of that Ghost Tequila? What do you think of Ghost Tequila?
A friend of mine was the first investor, so he turned me on to it a while ago. I'm a huge fan because that's kind of my like pet peeve is I love a good spicy margarita, but it tends to always be a little too spicy or not spicy enough. So that's a little plug for Ghost. It comes perfectly spicy. Boom.
All right. Well, maybe you can introduce me to your friend, because I feel like I really need a tequila sponsor for all of the shit that I do, and I don't have one yet. So,
all right. Well, we'll take that one off air.
I
like that idea. So let's do. I have a little bit of an alternate thought here. Appreciate the introduction. Obviously, I am the director of sales at Sendoso. I was the first sales hire at Sendoso, coming up on 5 years ago now. So been with the company from actually pre-seed up through our recent Series C with SoftBank. Lots of ups and downs, but obviously mainly up and to the right. So seen a ton. By a show of hands, how many people are familiar with Sendoso? That's almost everyone. So I'd really rather not plug Sendoso for the next 45 minutes, if that's cool with everyone. And Scott, I got a little bit of a thought here that I actually like your opinion on.
Okay.
I was kind of thinking over this today, trying to think how to make this the most valuable kind of time for everyone. Stuff that's been keeping me up, honestly, that, I'm sure other people are thinking through or not sure if they should be thinking through and whatnot. And I thought it might make sense to talk about some of the macroeconomic trends we're seeing and how they're going to apply to salespeople over the next 6 to 12 months plus. So what I mean by that is I think, it's no secret right now that inflation, market contraction, the music is slowing down, times are getting tough. However you want to sort of phrase it, I think we're all feeling a little bit of a shift in terms of sort of buyer's tone. Maybe you're noticing a lot of meetings starting to push in the past few weeks, maybe more than normal, or budget getting cut. Like, am I way off base, or does anyone feel like that's a little bit of what's going on out there right now?
I don't think you're way off base. I haven't had meetings cut, but I'm noticing people take a lot longer to make decisions about spend over a particular dollar figure.
Yeah. And I mean, depending on what segment people sell to, I'm curious kind of to get a show of hands on this as well. But, if a lot of your bread and butter the past few years has been selling into growth stage tech companies or those early stage IPO, no secret what's happened to those valuations. And I think that's been a little bit of the first wave of it. It's going to kind of keep happening. So what I would actually like to talk about is something that I've been doing some research on, speaking to some mentors about, is really that concept of selling to the CFO and tying your product, your value to a board level initiative. And the concept of the first stuff to go is basically anything that is not going to be anything that's not a board level initiative, anything that is not, I think mission critical is an overused term, because you could probably argue anything isn't mission critical. But the concept of speaking to that end value from the perspective of what are the company's top initiatives. So I actually was thinking about doing a little bit of a pivot, having a little bit of an open conversation on stuff like that. Does that sound interesting to the group? Would we be curious to hear more about that, or do you guys want to know about sending and connections? I'm happy to go either way, but I don't want to bore anyone and just go here plug Sendoso for the next 40 minutes.
Well, how many people sell to CFOs or have CFOs in their buying process? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's at least a third.
All right. Well, I think that's good enough. And
Good enough.
I'll tell you, even if you don't think you sell to the CFO, the odds are you do at some point. So what I want to talk about is a little bit of what I'm going to be working with my team on over the next couple of weeks, and what I think is going to be a critical mindset shift for sellers here over whatever this next sort of market phase looks like in terms of how you run your sales processes. So I think there's a couple things that go into the thought process here. The one that I'm going to get some eye rolls on is this is always going to go back to running your discovery. So I had actually this is kind of a little bit tangential, but who knows who Mark Roberge is by a show of hands? Had an incredible conversation with Mark a couple of weeks ago. He's an investor in Sendoso via his firm, Stage 2 Capital. I wanted to just pick Mark's brain on a concept or two. And the way he started the conversation, I had a really specific question. And in reflecting back to this conversation, it reminded me a lot of really any sort of sales combo, right? I had one specific question. I was sort of the buyer in this scenario, right? I had just like one thing I wanted to understand, which I get on calls all the time where someone's like, hey, I just, really quick, I just want to understand what it's going to cost, or how if you guys can send gift cards, can you guys send gift cards? So I had one really basic question for Mark. We had 30 minutes. And I was like, hey, I don't want to take all your time. Really quick question. I asked him the question. And he goes, so look, Nick, let me ask you a question. What do you think the 3 biggest initiatives are right now for Michelle and Chris? That's my COO president and my CEO. And I was like, Mark, I don't know. I'm just a sales leader. I got some guesses. And he goes, give me your best. What would you guess are the 3 biggest initiatives right now? 3 biggest things that your CEO and your COO and president are thinking about. All right. So I kind of go through it, try to talk about what they are. And he goes, okay, those sound pretty good. What are the 3 biggest things that the sales org is thinking about, worried about, top priorities for the sales organization as a whole? And this really had nothing to do with my question. My initial question was like, what are some of your tenets for building comp plans? Something pretty tactical. And he took it way out of the weeds. And his whole approach, in reflecting on it later, it was one of the most eye-opening conversations I've ever had. But the result was he basically gave me advice from the perspective of what are the 3 things that the organization is focused on, and then what are the 3 things that you specifically within your role are focused on. And he tied them down vertically from the exec and board level initiatives to my initiatives, all the way through to how he framed the advice on a question I had that was as tactical as, how do you think through building sales comp plans? And the lesson for me was really, it was incredibly eye-opening. And it was really, this is how I need to think about communicating with buyers more and more, which I think sounds fairly obvious, but the concept was such a paradigm shift for me in terms of pulling people out of the weeds and just saying, hey, look, I'm just trying to get a handle here. Help me understand, what are the 3 things the business is worried about? And so I've been using that as a real mental model as I'm trying to think through some of the impact to what I think we're going to see over the next couple of months, if you're not seeing it already, which is budgets are going to be getting cut and companies are going to be very careful about where they go and deploy capital. A, because I think capital is going to be harder to get if they're in positions like that. There's actually a lot of data to support that already. And B, because there's a chance that their team is having a harder time selling. And so they're going to be more focused on their bottom line if the top line slows down. So a couple things kind of getting into the practical of it that I'm working with my team on. The first piece is discovery. That sounds obvious, but at the end of the day, it often all goes back to discovery. So specifically within discovery, get outside of what the person who you're speaking to's role is and try to ask yourself, and I would write this down, and I would also implore you to have conversations with executives, even within your own business, about what their perspective on what their peers are worried about right now and what they're thinking about. So the example would be if you sell to the CMO, for example, go talk to your CMO, right? And try to understand, hey, what are you thinking about over the next 6 months, 4 quarters, right? What are your 3 biggest initiatives? Some of them are going to be very specific to your company and not apply to your general conversation, but some of them are going to be aha moments. And I think what you'll find is a lot of that is really going to start to translate to keying in a little bit more than just having to say, hey, what are your key initiatives when you get on the phone with a buyer? But it's also going to start to build a lot of trust when you can say things like, when I talk to CMOs, things I hear are, it's harder than ever to get a return on digital spend. I'm having a hell of a time meeting my X, Y, and Z goals. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the return to in-person events and the fact that I'm still spending on the return to in-person events and the fact that I still have to do virtual events. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how that all comes together, right? Whatever it might be, but starting to understand the language and specifically within a certain time frame, I think is going to really give you a lot of validity and a lot of help you reach that sort of North Star of being a trusted advisor in these sales conversations as much as possible. I'll take a step back there.
Yeah, let's pause here for a second. Chris had a question.
Yeah, totally.
When you were going through your conversation with Bears, the way I looked at it was almost like how you would cascade OKRs down through the organization. So basically being able to tie that individual action down at maybe the individual contributor level back through those goals to basically say, hey, here's how I'm going to be able to
correct
this particular organizational initiative,
correct,
as opposed to looking at things at a bit more I don't know, egocentric sort of perspective, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing when you were talking a second ago that I thought was interesting is when you're talking to your executive, whatever role it happens to be, if you're selling to the CMO and you're talking to your CMO, I would also ask them, where do you go to get really, really good information that you don't tend to see in your role, right? There's going to be either people they follow or blogs they go to or things like that that are going to have that type of information, whether it's industry specific or whether it is role specific, sometimes both. You'll be able to get that information and become a little bit more educated on what your buyer actually gives a shit about. So just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, so I think I would 100% agree with you. And I think you could sort of bucket this piece of the conversation into making sure that you're disciplined about tying the value that you're selling to an OKR. I think that's a really good way to put it, right? Key initiative, OKR, by the way, same exact thing. If you haven't heard that terminology before. Key initiative, most boards are going to have about, I don't know, 5 to 10 a year. 10's too many. Probably 5-ish is right. There might be a few that dovetail. 8 maybe, but there's a couple per year that every board, every leadership team is going to have. And what happens is it effectively goes like a game of telephone down the organization. A lot of times your buyer, if it's manager level, even director level, they're going to have been given some component of an OKR of that initiative, but in having it translated down to them by their, let's just say we're talking about, let's use Sendoso, really good example. So we sell to demand gen, right? It stands for objective key result. Is that right? It's something like that. Yeah. Objective key result. It was started at Google. It's an interesting process you can read up on, objectives and key results. It's just a framework for how you pick what your key initiatives are and how you track them. So the objective and then what the key results are from executing on them, basically. Initiatives is a really good word. So they basically said, hey, key initiatives are great, but we need a framework for actually making sure that we're following up on them and delivering. So let's use Sendoso as sort of the case study, right? So we sell into generally marketing, generally it's like a VP of demand gen. Oftentimes that is something that's coming from a CMO in terms of the initiative. And so the initiative could be something as simple as we want to increase our brand awareness in the market or brand equity, because at Sendoso, we're all about putting your logo everywhere. Think of it as like micro billboards for the market. That's one key piece. The other key piece is the human relationships, whatever. Let's say the CMO says, hey, I just got off a call and they're saying no one knows our brand. We have no brand. We're getting killed by insert big brand competitor here. We got to get our brand in the market more. Well, that could get handed down to someone else in marketing, and it could basically make its way to a marketing manager who inbounds to Sendoso, gets on the phone with an AE and says to my AE, I want to send out swag. And that could be exactly what that marketing manager was tasked with going and looking out. But at some point, I want to dig into that, Scott. I'm not letting you off the hook. So at some point, that's going to get handed down to the marketing manager, but it's effectively a game of telephone, because at some point along the way, they're deciding how to tackle it. And it's going to get split off into several different methods for basically tackling that initiative. So the process of then working that back up the chain to understand, okay, you want to send swag, what am I tied to? So that then you can go and express the value back upstairs when you get to that point. When you're at your executive review, you're going to get killed in that executive presentation, whatever you want to call it, if you're focusing on the value of sending swag. If you're able to, throughout discovery and by tying it back up to what the board level initiative is, if you can communicate in a way that resonates and rhymes with increased brand awareness, then all of a sudden your whole presentation is going to resonate up to the CMO. And your CMO, who might have to be more picky with their budget that quarter, is going to prioritize the one that sounds exactly like what their initiative is and what their result is for that quarter, rather than, hey, I have this company that's talking about sending swag. That's interesting. And I have this company that's talking about sending gifts, and that's cool. But I really like the idea of increasing brand awareness because I've been tasked with that. And I have a couple metrics. And if I think that this can improve the metrics that we've used to track brand awareness, that's really interesting. And I might be able to add a 0 to the budget I had for sending gifts if I can go and have an impact on that OKR. Questions? It's like we went deep on OKRs there a little bit. That's a good component though. All right, Scott, you got to give us like the 30-second problem with OKRs. We might get something out of this. So,
well, this will have to be a different topic to go deep. You want 30 seconds?
What's the, why?
Let me answer your question. Hold on. You want 30 seconds. Here's my 30-second speech on OKRs. The leadership team hates prepping and delivering OKRs. The people receiving OKRs hates being the recipient of said feedback and spending their time listening to all this stuff, 75 to 80% of which they disagree with, and the other 20% they kind of fake agreement with. So nobody really enjoys the process whatsoever. That's my quick speech on it.
All right, that's a good trailer for the next one where you have to present a better way. So we'll call that the trailer.
That's fair. Yes.
Okay. OKRs, a better way by Scott Leese, sponsored by Ghost Tequila.
I like that. There we go.
Cool. Yeah. Other questions around this? Scott hates having key initiative. Well, I mean, the irony, the running joke for a sales leader is like, your OKR is your number, right? But assuming that you don't sell to sales, and I would probably question a sales leader if you're selling to a VP of sales and you're not talking about increasing revenue, you're likely going to miss the mark on that one. But they can be pretty, these can be hairy when you start talking about some of the other functional leaders in an organization. Specifically, I keep going back to marketing because I sell to marketing. And a lot of the times there's very different terminology they use for saying 2 or 3 of the same things, and starting to understand what that language is that organization uses can be that aha moment for when they really start listening. I'll give you another example. One deal that we're in, and a lot of the times understanding what these initiatives, and it doesn't have to be an OKR. I don't want to like over index on the term OKR. This is just talking about initiatives, like something that company talks about. You probably can think of a few of the ones that exist this way for your business, where it's like, why do we keep talking about this thing that we all care about over and over and over and over again? It becomes part of the company's dictionary. It's part of their dialogue as something that they all just agreed is very important. And if you can sell using that language, odds are that's going to start to resonate up to the top as well. Because if you're using, this is actually a little bit of a tangent, but if like, try as hard as you can to remove anything that is your language from your communication with prospects. They don't know your language. They speak their language. So try to speak in their language. And that goes for any level of the organization. But back to a little bit more of the topic at hand. So I think a couple key pieces to bring this together. One, I would 100% focus on your discovery and making sure that you're identifying key initiatives within the business that you can tie this to. I would try to find the specific wording they use for those initiatives, and I would work that into your language, your future pitches as much as possible. If you hear keywords that make you think, ask them, what makes you say sustainability? Right? Like understand where the language is coming from. And if it's something that, because they may not even know, they might just go, oh, my VP just keeps talking about it. That's something that's a good note to key in on. So understand what the task they have at hand is, all the way to the key, all the way up to the board or the executive level. Does anyone sell into public companies? Show of hands. Couple. So you all already know this is public information, right? Like they put it in their 10K, which is pretty cool. So that would be my basic, like tie this to a board level initiative or you're really not going to get anywhere. And then use the language that they use. And then throughout the process, you're going to have this tied to that and quantified, or I think you're going to get killed out there in the next 6 to 12 months. So that being said, now I think it's worth putting a little bit of a bow on it with the human connection piece, because this is something that I think is critical within this framework of selling through budgetary restricted times. Your buyers are going to have to pick between, this is probably the wrong language to use, but your buyers are probably going to have to choose between their kids, which of their kids is their favorite. And I think this is a difficult concept to totally materialize, but I had it explained to me once and it made a lot of sense. So I'll bear with me a little bit. I'm trying not to be crass with it, but effectively there's going to be, if you're selling to VP level and they have, I don't know, let's say 5 reports, everyone is going to be going and championing for the tool, the product, whatever, that's going to make their life a lot easier. And I think a year ago, we were all selling into situations where all the kids got toys at Christmas. And I think what you're going to start to see is the parents are going to have to choose which kids get toys at Christmas. So this is where the concept of, and that's a little bit of why I wanted to frame this the way I did throughout the whole conversation. I would really keep this in mind in all your conversations and ask yourself what you can do to ensure that you're building that relationship with your champion all the way up that ladder to whoever your ultimate decision maker is. At the end of the day, this might be what makes the difference when they get their sort of list of, let's call it budget requests, right? They get 5 things written down on a piece of paper with a price tag next to all of them. The logic just might go out the window. And I think you always want to be really well prepared for the points where the logic goes out the window and human emotion starts to creep into the decision-making process. So given that you've done all your work, given that you've tied this to an ROI, that you're tied to a initiative, because that's why I didn't want to start with this. Like, I'm not saying if you make the right relationship, people are going to forego their business initiatives and people are just going to make decisions based on that you're nice. But if you've done your work and you have made sure that you tie this to an initiative, you've done the discovery, you understand their business and what they're trying to do, then I do think you are going to win on relationships beyond having done the first 90%. So what do I mean by this? I'll give it to you in terms of things that I think I have unique perspective on over the past 18 months. So a couple of things that are very different that we're seeing at Sendoso here that did not exist pre-COVID. The number one biggest trend that you will see in terms of selling, no matter who you are selling to, from the perspective from my perspective, right? This is obviously from the Sendoso lens, is that the line has been effectively blurred forever on what you are allowed to communicate about. Probably the short way of saying it is what's professional and what's not in a sales cycle. Here's my rule of thumb. If their camera is on and you can see it on Zoom, it is okay to reference and talk about and mention and build a relationship on. Everyone's doing this subconsciously, I think, right? Like, this makes total sense. Pick on Scott because it's a really easy example. If you're selling to Scott, and what I would bet you 95% of people do is the first 10 seconds of what I said when I jumped on. Like, wow, Scott, you got a lot going on back there, right? Oh, quite the background. What is that, Bills jersey? Oh, you're a Liverpool fan. What is that? Photo of you is...
That's highly accurate. The other 10% is somebody commenting on my appearance.
There you go. Yeah, you get that.
Oh, look at that beard. Oh, look how long your hair is, or whatever. Oh, every time.
Yeah. I'm going Johnny Damon in
See, I opened myself up for that one. I understand the reference.
I'm getting Johnny Damon vibes. Anyway, so I think in terms of doubling down there, a lot of people are doing that first, what I call sort of like the cheap rapport building. But I would bet you that, and Scott's probably a bad example because he's a celebrity, so take him off the table. But I would bet you that your buyers are having every single person that they meet for the first time on every single call mention something, try to bridge that gap. Very few are leveraging it to form that authentic relationship and form that connection. And this is really where we've seen those outsized returns in terms of people spending the time, the energy, the money to really try to reach sort of through that computer. And by the way, the other thing that's happening is you're probably not getting on planes to go see them as much, right? So how do you kind of bridge that gap of, hey, I'm going to sell this $100,000 software to you, and this is as close as we're ever going to get? Normally, 20 years ago, it's pretty unfathomable that you would have sold something at a price tag like that without, the cliche steak dinner and golf course. And, even as recently as 3 years ago, it was like you'd meet at a conference at least, or maybe you would get on a plane for one presentation. But now we know that we can do this all remotely. So how do you think about injecting some of that, hey, Scott's got a good product and Steve's got a good product, but, Scott took us to the steak dinner and we had a great time golfing, so I guess we'll just give him the business. As bullshit as it sounds, that stuff, that is still a core piece of human psychology, right? Like, people are going to do a lot of work to justify buying from people they like. So as long as you've done, and that's why I framed this the way I did, as long as you've done the first 90% and you give them enough logic to justify it, they're going to go with the emotional response, which is, I just like Nick. So how do you think about building that remotely? Well, you do it by doubling down on what you can. And I think the five senses, right? It's pretty obvious. Like what you can see is really, if you think about it, a world of opportunity that I see missed so frequently. So this is, and it's, you know, it's difficult to conceptualize, except for obviously Scott's a really good example. But I think if you probably think back, there's probably an example of a time where you've called out something and maybe even driven a great conversation, but did you capitalize on it throughout the sales cycle? Or was it just that first 5 seconds of rapport? And did you use it to really form an authentic relationship? Or was it just your quick opener each time? So, and this is my favorite, one of my favorite parts about Sendoso is that everyone can try it for effectively free, like expense something for like $5, not actually our platform, but the reason people buy our platform. So this is my one key takeaway. If you do nothing else, do this. The next time you're on a call with someone and you think of something that you think would make them smile, go out of your way to have that be something that is going to interrupt their week at some point later that week or the next week, not as part of your intentional business process, and inject it. Send it. So actually, instead of your meetings, right? Instead of the thing you're doing already where you get on every call and you're like, oh, the backdrop's really coming together, right? Send something. You're going to notice there's a ton of different opportunities, a ton of different things that you can do. And this is the
Can I add one thing here, Nick?
Yeah, please.
This is pertinent to the background and then send something. If you nail it, you send something that person now displays in their background and lives there forever, if you will. So example, posters, volleyballs, chessboards, all this. These are things that people are sending me. And when they get it right, it ends up sitting behind me. Wilson, that's right, Jamie, and lives there, right? And now is a part of like that cycle, that buying process, that relationship that you're talking about.
I would even go as far, and this might be controversial. I would go as far as to start to include any of these tidbits that you're getting, like context clues, in your notes in Salesforce. Like if I was selling to Scott, I do this a little bit subconsciously now because I'm always looking for opportunities to send stuff that's going to resonate. But the cool thing is I end up having these notes that are contextual that I can use in follow-up emails and to send a GIF if someone's going dark, make references here and there.
Yeah.
It ends up being a really cool piece of it. So like if I was selling to Scott, I would write down, surfer beard. No, I would write down, I see like Curb Your Enthusiasm, Bills fan, Liverpool. Like that's just right offhand. And it's an interesting training to do for those of you who have teams. Is just get your team on your weekly call or whatever, and just look at everybody's background and be like, what does the background tell you about so-and-so? And for these context clues and notes that you would add to, an account about who somebody is, what they like to do, all of this kind of stuff. It's kind of an interesting little game that you can try. Brian has a question for you, Nick. Yeah, let's do it. Where are we?
Yeah, Nick, I guess I'm curious about, personal rapport versus business rapport, right? So I feel like I've had that opportunity or seen it where it's right, the building of rapport where, hey, Scott, Liverpool, blah, 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 but then you really have nothing of business value to add, right? So I know Scott pretty well. So I know Scott is probably like, okay, cool, dude, you saw my background, but like, if you can't add any value to my life or to my business, like everybody can see my background. So like do a little bit of research, bring a little value to me as far as what can happen. So do you have any thoughts there on whether it be a balance or a ratio or just how you do the business rapport versus personal rapport, because at the end of the day, if I've got a CMO on the line, right, and everybody's asking him, oh, I see you're in wherever, how's the weather there, blah, 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 right? I just wasted 5 to 7 minutes of valuable business time with that person to say, hey, kind of to your point earlier, hey, I've talked to my CMO. I know these are the initiatives that seem to be important to most other folks. How about yourself? Right. So like, how do you think about that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would split it off into 2 separate topics, and that was a little bit of why I started with making sure that you're delivering value and understanding the business initiatives. To me, also the contextual. So one is you can leverage it without bringing it up. That's the interesting part about using the contextual, like using just what you see. You can, if I have a great first call with Scott and he goes dark on me, I can, if I have in my notes, like Bills fan, I can leverage that to get him back on the hook later. I don't have to have brought it up at all. Like, that's kind of cool. So I think you absolutely want to deliver on the value 100% in the conversation. That was the main reason I started there, was like, not to oversimplify this, you have to do your homework and you've got to be doing, all the sales best practices 100%. And I would say, well, one is people are going to tell you if they're okay kind of chit-chatting or not. Like, that's pretty easy to get a hold of in a conversation. If someone's like, hey, yeah, it's the fucking Bills. What do you got for me, kid? Like, that's a very different conversation. And, sometimes you do have to just go into it. I would avoid over it. It's tricky, but it tends to be something that people are more open with in a one-on-one setting. And I think this is a key piece of the sales process too. Like, if you're not scheduling time with your champion the day before you have a meeting with your champion and other people, I think you're missing an opportunity to create that relationship and to maximize that next meeting, but by 1000%. Like, that is huge. I could do 45 minutes on preconditioning meetings and follow-up meetings and syncs and all that stuff. I really think splitting every member of the buying committee off into an individual sale and ensuring that you are selling them personally, or at a minimum the departments, is a key piece of this. And if you do that, you're going to realize that you have opportunities to make relationships with all these people individually, right? Like, I think it actually is going to kill you if you're in a meeting with 5 people and you think you're making relationships with all 5 and you think what you're saying is resonating with all 5, unless they all have the exact same job, right? Like, if your product touches 5 different departments, to me, use the first 30, show what you can do, and then split them into 5 separate calls, form 5 separate relationships, find 5 things about each of them that you can leverage. And then by the time they get to a meeting, the CMO is going to go, hey, what'd you guys think of product 1? You're my buying committee. What'd you guys think of product 1? They're like, we liked it. Cool product. They're like, what'd you think of 2? And they're like, oh my God, we love Nick. That was amazing. It was so great. We talked about what he can do for my team specifically. Did he do that for you too? Yeah, it's crazy. You too, Matt? Yeah, I felt like it was just for SDR. Can he do what you want too? Yeah. So
Let's go to Hayden.
Yeah, sorry. And we got Amy. I got you too.
Yeah. Hey, I sell into the cybersecurity, information security space. So your comment around the bills and just very dry. So any tips? Because most of the time people don't have their cameras on, even 4, 5, 6, even some of my clients that I've had for a year, they're just very introvert. And I get like CMOs, very bubbly. So do you have any kind of one-liners or tips around not like guilt tripping them, but to get them to leave their camera on? Because obviously you have yours on, but I find that most of the time I'm just talking to a blank screen.
Do you leave yours on too?
Always. Yeah, I always have my camera on. And you'd think like by you having it on the whole time, and maybe 10 to 15% of the time they'll see that I have mine on and they'll turn theirs on, but most of the time it's just off. And then it just kills me when you're presenting right and they're typing in the background. You're like, they're just not even paying attention to me right now, whereas at least if they have theirs on, you can see how much they're actually paying attention or listening to you.
Yeah. So I have a really I have one shitty, like stereotypical example that actually a friend of mine did. So similar story. And I've never sold in cybersecurity, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert or anything. And that sounds really difficult, to be honest with you. So I got one anecdote. So a friend of mine sells in cybersecurity, and he had similar experience. He was like, I'm just sitting there talking to myself for like 45 minutes. So he sent each person after the call, and it was his like number one target account. And he was just kind of pissed that he had no idea how it went and all this stuff. So he sent everyone a gift card for Disney Plus. And he basically said something along the lines of, hey, if I wasted your time, I thought, the least I could do would be to make up for it a little bit. I've really been enjoying, the new Boba Fett series. Thought maybe you'd enjoy it. And this is obviously incredibly stereotypical. And like, I apologize in advance for even saying it, but this is a true story. So, and they were like, that is incredibly thoughtful of you. Thank you. So that's also my go-to, by the way. If people have kids in the camera, which this I know isn't helpful for you, but if someone brings like a baby, they're like, oh, sorry, I send them something. And I'm like, hey, here's, we have like a little kid bundle. It's one of our partners has like on the platform. And I'll be like, hey, hopefully this will occupy the kids. You can get yourself, 30 minutes of peace and quiet.
Have you ever had, just to
kids
kind
and
of
dogs.
elaborate on that though quickly, and Scott, you can slap me later if I'm talking too much.
Oh, it's fine. Go ahead.
But like, have you ever had like the annoying people of like, oh, we can't accept gift cards, they're just stick in the mud, like, I can't, we can't accept this. And then you almost feel like, oh, I'm trying to take the initiative, and like they take it as you're trying to buy them, and you're like, did I just do more damage than good by trying to be thoughtful and trying to send them something? And what's your counter to that?
It's 100% a possibility. Like, I think your messaging to me says it all. Like if you say gift card, and if you, I think, overinflate the value of it, then I think there's a gray area, 100%. Yeah. It's a really tough one, to be honest with you.
Let's go to Amy.
Yeah, public, no.
Okay, so my question has a bunch of pieces to it. I will try to be succinct about it, Nick. First and foremost, thank you very much, Sendoso. I'm working with Andy Paul, and so buying all those books and like doing the competition, that was fucking awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm curious about, I'm just going to read the questions. When is it most appropriate or most effective to gift? Is it before the motion to open opportunities? Is it during, or is it after, right? Are you seeing any trends on that one? I mean, maybe this one's a little off on the side.
Wait. Let's pause there and let him answer the first question, and then we can come back and let him answer the second one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I hate the term gifting, and I think this might actually end up hitting. This might end up helping you. To me, a gift is by definition, like it is for something. Like there is a reason for a gift, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like your birthday.
What word would you use?
So I use the word sending because to me, there's always an opportunity to send something, and a lot of the time it can have a $0 value. So, and yeah, Hayden, this might actually even play for you. I think one of the most underutilized things in the world is handwritten notes, right? I think that you can send, odds are, if you reach out to your marketing team, someone probably still has a stack of case studies they used to hand out at conferences, and maybe they're starting to do it again. Be like, can you send me 20 of them? Or like, I'm going to print a bunch out and stuff envelopes and write a Post-it note and send it to people. That sounds ridiculous. But if you can get their address, everyone checks their mail. Full stop, especially if it's hand addressed. So no one read your handwriting. I think that makes it more personal. So that's a little bit of a tangent. I don't mean to go on a tangent on you. So I think specifically if you're talking gifting, I think a gifting is a thank you, right? And I think that's really, either when you're getting sort of late stages, It's also going to be a little bit of a customer acquisition cost conversation in terms of like, when does it make sense to spend what? But let's just say late stage and it's going really well, especially if you're thanking your champion for what they've done. I also point blank ask my champion a lot. I'm like, hey, I know this is going to Mike's desk for approval. How would Mike react if I sent him something, you know, is that going to hurt our odds or help our odds? You'd be shocked. People will tell you. I had 20 minutes ago, I was on a call and they were like, oh my God, if you send him wine, he would love that. Right. Boom, check. So I think in terms of actual gifts, that's what I would do. Or whenever you think of something that just feels like it's too good to pass up, right? Like when you connect with someone and you find something in common and you have that conversation, or they express to you that you're having a tough day, and you really just feel like that's an opportunity to humanize the whole bullshit business world process stuff. Like when you can really connect, I think those are those opportunities where it can really be magical. Honestly, if it's authentic and you really think of it, I think that's just amazing. And that's where the magic happens. But in general, I mean, I don't think there's ever like really a bad time, honestly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I like that too about the thank you. That makes sense. All right. So I'm partially a little bit nervous about, so maybe this doesn't apply as much if I'm using, you know, the sending as a thank you, but what like peers that talk that maybe like if I didn't send a thank you or a incentive to every single champion, like I'm just, is it silly to, am I overthinking being nervous about people getting upset about maybe not being included on the share? And then there's one more question after this, but I'll pause.
That's an interesting thought that, to be honest, I haven't really considered too much ever. Like in 4.5 years, I haven't really overthought that.
Well, leave it to me. I'm great at overthinking, Nick. So like I'll overthink for all of us together for like all fucking year.
Yeah, I would probably say that if
It's true.
you feel like you're missing someone, right? Like if you feel guilty, then I would just probably send it to both people. But
Okay.
that also comes down a little bit to how personal it is, right? If you're like, well, like if it's, you know, they're not going to be like, hey, this person sent me this really personal thing based on something that we had a conversation about. They're not going to be like, why didn't I get that super specific personal thing?
Yeah, they're not going to tell you, but they're going to fucking harbor on that internally and all those intrinsic motivators that you were talking about. Like, there goes my deal.
Then pick the most important person, send it to them.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm probably overthinking. I'll let you know if this becomes a problem. Okay. So I was big on the sending scene. Like I remember I was repping a service at one point, but whatever. But I'm curious about your take on what's coming next. Like, what are you most excited about? What are you seeing that's cool and different, even for those that are using gifting in their motions? Like, what's the coolest thing that's going on in your universe right now? Tell us all the things.
Oh, I'm trying to think of what I'm allowed to talk about right now. You might have to give me a second. I don't know what is totally allowed. So I think macro trends, I think sustainability, and I think localized things that are sort of like charity based. So there is I shit you not, we have a vendor that is in Europe that sends a 100% recycled plastic bottle of wine in, like, I think it's called pet recycled plastic, or I don't know. It's a 100% sustainable like bottle of something, and talks about how this vineyard plants trees, so the carbon offset is actually net positive or something. A lot of trends right now around sustainability and just generally having this not be junk that ends up in a landfill and being bad for the environment long run. And I think in terms of digital gifting, a lot of charity, especially right now, is really, really common. What else do I think?
I'm not looking for common, Nick. I'm looking for outlier and different and
outlier and different. God, I mean,
Well, think on
I
it.
think
I'll
we're,
message- yeah.
I'll come back to you. I think of anything. I think those are early, but I think those are trending in the right direction.
Okay,
Like, I don't think enough people are doing it, but I think that's where I'm seeing like there starts to be an uptick in ways that I haven't before. More and more people are thinking about that. I'll have to come back to you.
okay, think of it. And then have you seen, so the last one, I want to go, so I'm introducing a new service, whatever, it's a long story, I'll spare you all the details, but I want to incorporate an expensive gift of
Yeah.
a microphone. So
Yeah.
think of like third party, right? So to like doing a conversation series with buyers for podcasts, internal sales enablement purposes.
For sure.
But I want to build into the project the cost to send buyers like a Blue Yeti microphone. Is that how big of a or a hard of a sell will that be? Like, is that something that you've seen, or is it like all very low cost things?
I don't know if I totally understand the question. You said a Blue Yeti microphone?
Yeah, okay, so it's a microphone. It's about $100.
Oh,
So a gift.
hey, I'm sorry. What's the context on why you were sent? Like, where do you work?
Okay. Yeah, so it's $100 microphone. So think of doing a sales enablement podcast series, an internal one for a sales team. Part
Cool.
of this teaching series is to do conversations with buyers.
Cool.
In order to make it good, right, you have to make the audio sound good, and therefore the mic, the buyer who agrees to do this conversation, it makes all the difference. And so I'm just thinking about how to even broach these conversations of building in an extra couple $1,000 to gift these to potential buyers. Like, is that something that you've seen or heard of?
I think you'll find that it's really easy to get buy-in for that if you understand the data and you basically just go and say like, hey, I'm going to spend $100 on anyone that hits a 25% chance of closing. Like, can we afford an extra $400? Because again, if it's 25% win rate times 100, $400. Like, are we good for an extra $400 on, per customer, as long as the ARR is over a certain percent? And I think it's going to affect our win rates by 5%. Like, can I go test this for a quarter?
Perfect. I like it. I heard make the damn business case. Thank you very much, Nick. That was exactly what I was looking for.
No, for sure.
All right. That's all I got. I'm going back on mute. Thank you.
I like that idea a lot too. And I think you'll see some really good success with that. Other idea, if you really want to go crazy and you get shot down, like go rogue, buy 5, expense them and send them to people and then be like, hey, you dumb assholes, I got 3 people to sign up doing this. You're fucking wrong.
It's man after my own heart right there. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if cursing is okay. I feel really bad. I saw a kid like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, hopefully, it's on my show, but it doesn't bother me.
What else we got? You can just come on.
No more questions in the queue as of now.
Hey, Nick, pretty tactical question. And obviously we've been virtual, hybrid, whatever you want to call it now, for 2 years, but what have you seen just from a standpoint of comfort level with when you are trying to send something like, hey, I'd like to send you something, what's your address?
So I've got 2 pro tips. One is make it a really long I'll start with, are you using a platform that allows you to have address confirmation? Or are you asking people for their address in an email?
Yeah, we don't have anything as cool as Sendoso.
So I would just say, hey, I wanted to send you something. Are you and even if they're not, like refer to their business address. Just say, hey, I have something I really want to send you. That was maybe they go, yeah, something I was thinking about, something I thought you might enjoy. If I send it to, will it get to you? Or is there a better address I could use? That's not saying tell me where you live, in my opinion. I think that's a little bit softer, right? Like, it's very hard to get offended if someone says, if I ship something to your office, will it get to you, right? The answer is obviously no, right? Like, I don't think they even know if it would. But you're going to give yourself like a 25% chance that they'll say, hey, no, but send it to blank.
I like that.
Yeah, there are systems, by the way, there are like non-SaaS one-off gift tools on the internet that you can just like buy things one-off for people and generate a link so they can confirm their address so that you don't see it. They're out there. I don't know any off the top of my head. But yeah, you can definitely like get it. And if you're like Sendoso, it's hard for us even because we have the link that they can press to put their address in, but people are skeeved by links half the time. So the more like human you can make that, the better. So I just say like, if you are using a link, make it a really long hyperlink and like put a lot of normal writing in there instead of being like, click here to redeem or sounding like an absolute robot. Just be like, hey, we use this really cool system so I can confirm your address. Just click here and put it in. Thanks so much. Like, make it really normal and human. And then people are more likely to click that link. Other pro tip, does anyone use Sendoso or any other like service where you can send the link?
I do.
No, all prospects, you're setting yourselves up.
Now there's a couple. Eric does. Davidek does.
There we go. So I have one, but it's my new little,
Jamie does.
okay. All right. We got a couple. So my one little new hack is I will tell people's, if you can somehow have people's like EA on for scheduling in a sales cycle. Has this ever happened to anyone? I'm seeing it more and more now. People's EAs will like help you schedule a follow-up.
Yes. I see it.
Okay. It happens. A lot of times you don't notice, but actually like looking up who the people in the email chain are, you'll notice it is. But they might be sending it through, the emails might be coming from Scott, even if his EA is helping coordinate it. And his EA might only have been on that first email, which is why you're missing it. This is really nuanced. If you know the name and you can say like, they're on the email and you can reference like, hey, Scott wanted to send you over something. Click here to put in to confirm your address. By the way, Amy, if you want to confirm it for him too, that's totally fine. Like giving other people permission to put someone's address in if they know it is a little ballsy, but if you think the relationship is there, then they're like, oh, okay, totally, I'll handle that for them. That's my new,
Awesome. Thanks, man.
that's my new trick. But to answer your question, I would just, yeah, it's tricky and I would send links, but I like the address. I like just like, is this the right address and setting their corporate one. Tell me where you live. I don't know about that.
Any other questions for Nick? Lori, we can't hear you.
Hey there, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Nick, I'm wondering when I send notes sometimes and I'm trying to, do you have ideas on quick ways to say thank you or creative ways to say thank you? Anything that you use?
Maybe you could give me a little more context. Are you talking about like in a follow-up email, on a note card? What's your typical method for sending it? Or maybe a practical example would help.
I mean, I've tried cards. It didn't really help me that much, but I still think it's worth me continuing to do. Like when you're writing a note, whether it's a thank you or whatever, what are some of your go-to lines? Like what is the way that you write?
I mean, honestly, I think two basic tenets are like less is more and be yourself. So I would just keep it really, really brief. I think the concept of how people say now, don't send an email that you can't read on an iPhone. Like obviously it's different if people are reading a note, but I think the attention span deficit is the same principle. Like if they can't read it in 30 seconds, that's probably too long. And I wouldn't overthink it. Honestly, I would just be yourself, like as much as you possibly can be within the framework of what your business allows. Sorry, I know that's not great advice. I apologize.
No, it's helpful. Thank you.
One thing that I would add, because I get a lot of stuff sent, two things that I would add. The first thing is, please, for the love of God, you don't need to show off your fancy cursive penmanship that you learned in 5th grade or whatever. But if I can't read your writing, then the card is not really helping you very much. No, I know how ridiculous and simple that sounds, but it happens more often than you think. The second thing is, when you send somebody something, make sure your name is in there somewhere. I can't tell you how many gifts and packages show up at my house and there's no name, there's no I have no idea who sent me this thing. And I start asking people and they're like, no, I didn't send it. I don't know. And sometimes I never find out. Other times it's like a week or two later and somebody's like, hey, did you get that thing? And I'm like, oh, that was you, Nick? Maybe put your name on it next time, or tell me something's on my way. So make sure your name or your company or something is there so people can identify where it came from. Those are two small, hopefully obvious tips that are less than obvious for some people. I am living this.
I used to do that though. I used to send people really random shit, and then as soon as it arrived, send them an email that was like curious about the blank, and they were like, "Oh."
Well, that would be an upgrade over my experience.
If you do it right away. But yeah, that's a very, very valid point. No curse. Who can even
Can I hear a
curse?
story? I'm super curious, Nick, about like what some of the crazy things that you've sent, like some unusual stories, maybe not necessarily through Sendoso, but how you used kind of those sorts of ideas.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, one that I really love is Gong really wanted to. It was during COVID, and they kind of wanted to really like break. This is, I think, one of the best marketing campaign versions I've seen. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff that AEs have sent before. One AE sent a like Star Destroyer Lego kit to a CTO and closed $1 million deal. That's a pretty crazy story. And wrote like a long note about how getting the deal done was like a parallel to when Luke shot down the destroyer. It was insane. But one of the best, I think the AE creativity ones to me are a lot easier because there's a lot you can use. It's hard when marketing teams are trying to do stuff that's like would apply to any customer. And I thought this was really creative. So Gong was trying to figure out what to do for, I think it was holidays last year or something. And they're like, we don't want to do like boring holiday gifts, blah, blah. So they had unicorn piñatas made, and they filled them with candy. And they basically sent hundreds of these unicorn piñatas out to all their top target accounts. The really cool part though, so it was fun. It was like literally a unicorn that was arriving to these people with a note on it. But all of the messaging from the note was about how the piñata was exactly like, and this is, I think, a really key piece if you're going prospecting with sends. Like a lot of people miss this, and it's fairly obvious. If you can tie what you're sending back to your value, it's a great prospecting send. If not, it's bribey. Like that's, I think, a really interesting caveat. So you'll find that the dollar amount the dollar amount matters a lot less if it feels really relevant to what you do. Then it feels like a business send. So the Gong example, not that the piñatas were crazy expensive or felt bribey in the first place, but they had the piñata sent. The entire message was about how your sales conversations are a piñata. And from the outside, you might not be able to tell that there's much going on, but once you crack it open, there's all this wonderful stuff that comes out, and there's something for everyone because Gong's like, hey, we can send data to the CTO and product features you can forward to this person, and the VP of sales knows about this. And it's like, you might be someone who likes a certain kind of candy and you get that. It was one of the smartest messages I've ever seen. in terms of something that they got to apply to all of their customers. So I really like that idea, because I see a lot of AEs kind of contradictory to my earlier point, like obviously double down when you have the opportunity to, but I see so many reps double down on something really specific to one person when you have the chance to, but I see so many reps driving themselves crazy trying to think of something that's super creative and personal. And at the end of the day, if you can tie something that might seem kind of innocuous back to your product in a really creative way, it's going to be at a minimum memorable. Right. And you can do that, I think, in a lot of interesting ways, even if you don't use a tool like Sendoso. I think sending like a picture of even some like random common item and like leveraging that messaging and saying like, I'd actually love to send you a pinata too. Like, where could I send that to? Like, now that I just pitched you on how our product is a pinata, to give you an example, can I send you a pinata? Would love to discuss it with you, you know, something a little bit more creative than the typical, like, would love to chat with you over a coffee. Someone did the same concept with like a pie, and like they tied the value back to pie, and they were like, I'd buy you a coffee, but I think the meeting would be more fun over pie. Like, can I send you some pie and we can talk about how insert company name is pie. Yeah, I'd love to chat with you over pinata.
Any other questions for Nick? Otherwise, we'll wrap a little bit early tonight. Everybody can get on with their evening. Anything else you want to know about from Nick's conversation tonight? No? All right, Nick, you want to give us any parting shots on your way out?
No, I don't have too much. I mean, I'm nick@sendoso.com, but don't email me. Connect with me on LinkedIn, because it'll just get buried. Connect with me on LinkedIn.
Your Sendoso email inbox is in worse shape than the LinkedIn inbox. How is that even possible?
It's just a lot. It's funny enough. It's easier to tell if like the LinkedIn ones are legit or not. I don't know.
That I understand.
Email just gets buried. Because LinkedIn, it's like in 2 seconds. If you reference Tequila Tuesday, you know what I mean? Like, that's very
there you
obvious,
go.
as opposed to like, I'm reaching out on behalf of a red hot startup.
All right, man. I appreciate you spending some time with us and helping us out. And thanks to Sendoso, as always, for sponsoring Tequila Tuesday. We'll see you all next time.